All right, let's dive into natural selection. If you're tackling AP or IB biology, you know this is a huge topic. It's one of those core concepts you absolutely have to nail, so we're going to break it all down and make sure you're feeling confident for those exams.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the big idea, the main concept. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty, the 4 conditions that have to be met for it to work. We'll explore where all the necessary variation comes from, see it happen with a cool case study, and then, super important, we'll bust some common myths that can really trip you up.
First things first, let's get the big picture and lock in a really solid definition for what we're talking about.
Okay, so what does this actually mean? The key word here is filters. Think of the environment as this filter that puts pressure on every single individual. It basically determines who gets to survive and who gets to reproduce. But here's the critical part. While selection acts on individuals, it's the entire population that evolves over time. For your exams, you got to remember that key phrase. Evolution is a change in allele frequencies over generations.
And this little diagram, it's perfect. It shows the whole cycle so clearly. So you start with variation, you've got different colored butterflies. Then boom, overproduction. Way more butterflies are born than can possibly survive. Now the environment, in this case the predator snake, acts as that filter we talked about. The green and brown butterflies, they're way better camouflaged, so they survive and get to reproduce, passing on those camouflage genes. Over time, the whole population shifts to be more green and brown. That's evolution in action.
All right, let's get a little more specific. You see, natural selection doesn't just happen out of nowhere. A population has to meet 4 very specific conditions. You can almost think of it like a recipe. And here they are. The 4 ingredients: variation, heritability, overproduction, and differential success. Seriously, think of this as a checklist. If you're looking at a population and you can tick all 4 of these boxes for a certain trait, you can say with 100% certainty that evolution by natural selection is happening.
First, and honestly, this is the big one, there have to be differences between individuals. If everyone is identical, there's nothing for selection to choose from. It's a total non-starter.
And Darwin's finches are the classic poster child for this. I mean, just look at the incredible variation in these beak shapes. Each one is like a specialized tool, perfectly suited for a different kind of food. Some are great for cracking big, tough seeds, others for plucking insects. These observable traits, what we call phenotypes, are the raw material that selection gets to work with.
Okay, so you've got variation, fantastic. But for it to matter in the long run, those traits have to be heritable. This just means there's a genetic reason for the trait. It's written in the DNA, so it can be passed down from parents to their kids. If a trait isn't heritable, any advantage an individual has just disappears when they die.
Here's a super simple way to think about it. Let's say you hit the gym like crazy and get totally ripped. That's what we call an acquired trait. But your kids aren't going to be born with those muscles, right? That's because the change isn't in your DNA. Heritability is that essential bridge that lets a helpful trait in a parent actually show up in the next generation.
All right, our third ingredient. This is where things get a little intense. Organisms tend to produce way more offspring than their environment can possibly handle, and that sets the stage for a massive struggle over limited resources. Food, water, a place to live, you name it.
This simple sentence right here has enormous consequences. Think about all those sea turtle hatchlings scrambling for the ocean, or thousands of acorns sprouting under a single oak tree. This guaranteed overproduction means there's going to be a struggle for existence. Not everyone makes it.
And that struggle for existence leads us right to our 4th and final condition, differential success. Because of their specific heritable traits, some individuals are just going to be better at surviving and having kids than others.
Now this is where we need to be really clear about the word fitness. When a biologist talks about fitness, they are not talking about being the fastest or the strongest. Biological fitness is all about one thing and one thing only: reproductive success. An individual with higher fitness is simply one who leaves more surviving offspring. That's it. They pass on their helpful traits to the next generation more often than others do.
So we've talked a lot about how important variation is, but a really great question to ask is, well, where does it come from in the first place?
It's really a 3-part answer. First, you get brand new traits from mutations. These are just random changes in the DNA that create new alleles. Then, the other 2 sources come from sexual reproduction. Meiosis is like a giant genetic shuffling machine, mixing up existing alleles in new ways. And fertilization brings together alleles from 2 completely different parents. So you could say mutation creates the new cards and sex shuffles the deck.
And it's so important to remember this link. Natural selection acts on the outside, the physical trait, the phenotype. But what's actually being inherited, what's changing in the population from one generation to the next, are those underlying differences in the DNA, the alleles that build those traits.
Okay, theory is great, but let's put it all together. We're going to watch how these 4 conditions can drive real, actual change in a population.
Check this out. It's so cool because it lays the whole process out perfectly. Step 1. You see variation. There are white mice and gray mice, and we know that trait is heritable. The mice also overproduce. Then in comes the selection pressure, the owls. Step 2. The white mice are way easier to see, so they get eaten more often. That's differential survival. And by step 4, what do you see? The survivors, who are mostly gray, have reproduced, and the allele for gray fur has shot up in the population. That right there is natural selection.
All right, this next part is absolutely critical if you want to ace your exams. Knowing what natural selection is half the battle. Knowing what it is not is the other half. Avoiding these mistakes is key.
So let's be crystal clear. First, an individual organism cannot evolve in its lifetime. Populations evolve over many generations. Second, evolution doesn't grant wishes. A giraffe didn't get a long neck because it needed one. The variation for a slightly longer neck had to already be there by chance. Third, there is no end goal. Evolution isn't progressing towards some perfect creature. And finally, and this is a big one, while the mutations that create variation are random, the process of selection is the exact opposite of random. It systematically favors traits that work better in a given environment.
So, to wrap it all up, let's do a quick exit ticket, a little thought experiment. What happens to natural selection if you take one of our key ingredients out of the recipe? Well, if a trait isn't heritable, any selection on the parents is basically a dead end. If there's no competition, the selection pressure is super weak or non-existent. And if there's no variation, then there's nothing for selection to choose between and evolution just stops. Thinking through these scenarios is truly the best way to get a solid grip on this amazing process that has shaped all life on Earth.